Nikki Haley was born Nimrata Nikki Randawa in the Midlands hamlet of Bamberg to Indian immigrants. Her father taught at Voorhees College for 30 years, and she grew up working the books at her mother's clothing company. Haley, a brown girl growing up in a black and white world as she describes it, learned life lessons about race, discrimination, and acceptance from an early age, lessons she's carried with her over her 51 years. She attended and graduated from Clemson University, where she met her husband Michael the first weekend of her freshman year. The two started their family in Lexington County with their daughter Rena and son Nayland. Haley was inspired to run for office after hearing Hillary Clinton speak at an event in Greenville and decided to challenge a 30-year incumbent state representative, Larry Kuhn, for his seat, and she beat him in a runoff in 2004. From there, Haley was on her way up the ranks as a House lawmaker, even becoming Majority Whip, until she challenged the status quo by pushing for greater transparency with the simple act of roll call votes on the record, which soon had her on the outs with her party. The fallout from her legislative independent streak and push for reforms led to another life lesson of fighting for what is right despite the cost, because it soon translated into a bigger win thanks to a confluence of support from fellow disruptor, then Governor Mark Sanford, who pushed her to run as his successor, while the growing Tea Party movement raged, and former vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin's endorsement propelled her into the runoff, despite a daunting primary field of seasoned politicians.
So I figured, let me swing by and give a shout out to a strong pro-family, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, pro-development, conservative reformer, your next governor, Nikki Haley.
Where Nikki Haley, who wasn't well known when the governor's race began, has beaten out the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, and a four-term member of Congress to take a big lead into the runoff. And State Representative Nikki Haley joins us now. Congratulations on last night, Representative Haley. Is that what you saw last night, voters venting their frustration?
You know, I think what we saw was the fact that voters want elected officials who remember who it is they work for. They want someone that understands the value of a dollar. They are tired of backroom deals. They want to make sure there's more transparency and accountability, and it certainly showed in South Carolina, and I think we're going to continue to see it show across the country. You did face a very, very tough campaign. I know South Carolina has a reputation for that. As John Carl reported, two men who had some connections to rival campaigns said they had affairs with you. And last night, the man you faced in the runoff, Congressman Barrett, said character is not one of the things that matters. It's the only thing that matters. Do you expect more incoming during the runoff? You know, I mean, the one thing we noticed was we were Nikki Who about 6 weeks ago, and then all of a sudden it showed we had a double-digit lead in the polls, and then we had everything but the kitchen sink thrown at us. And our opponents got together. They threw as much distractions as they could, but we stayed very determined. All it did was make us more focused on making sure the voice of the people were heard.
She won the primary and went on to defeat then Democratic State Senator Vincent Shaheen in the election, with her one-time primary opponent and future Lieutenant Governor Henry McMaster introducing her after becoming the first woman and minority governor of South Carolina on election night 2010.
I'll tell you, we are red hot. We are getting ready to show what South Carolina can do, and our new leader is Nikki Haley.
2 months later, on Inauguration Day, she walked down the Statehouse steps with her predecessor, Governor Sanford, as she began an administration focused on turning the page, navigating the fallout of the Great Recession by growing the state's economy and manufacturing base, one job at a time.
Today, our state and nation face difficult times. Far too many of our fellow citizens are without a job. Our economy is not growing as fast as it should, and our state budget has the largest shortfall ever. But when I survey this troubled landscape, I am not discouraged. We know that tough times can produce some of the best decisions, and it is our duty to make this time of challenge into the opportunity it can be to turn our state around.
During her second inaugural address in 2015, Haley acknowledged the initial concerns those had of her first term, especially as the youngest governor in the country.
I am not unaware that 4 years ago, when I spoke for the first time as governor, there was some skepticism. It was not unfounded. I was young, I was unknown, and I was different. But I knew in my heart then, as I know now, what South Carolina could be. We are a fiercely proud state, a state with a history as rich as it is complicated, a state where the intensity of our individualism is surpassed only by the shared joy we draw from being collectively South Carolinians.
While her first term was about fixing South Carolina, her second term was soon about holding the state together through natural disasters, the shooting of Walter Scott, and the massacre of 9 black parishioners at the hands of a white man at Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston on June 17, 2015, an event that nearly broke Haley.
This is Bible study. You know, this is what so many South Carolinians do every Wednesday night. And so the shock of something like this happening in the most sacred of places was hard to stomach. What was hard for me was the heartbreak of what had happened. And how do you heal a state in a way that children aren't scared to go to church? And how do you heal a state in a way that that's the place we go to feel safe? And when you suddenly realize that a place like that is no longer safe, you want to wrap your arms around the state and protect them. But there was no way not to grieve.
The power of the horrific event, the way the shooter idealized the Confederate battle flag, and the grace victims' families showed led Haley to call for the downing of the controversial symbol that had been flying out front of the Statehouse since 2000.
So, you know, it's hard for us to look at what is happening today and not think back to 22 days ago. It seems like so long ago because the grieving has been so hard. But at the same time, we have all been struck by what was a tragedy that we didn't think we would ever encounter. 9 amazing people that forever changed South Carolina's history.
Just a day before the horrific shooting in Charleston, the New York real estate mogul turned Republican firebrand Donald Trump announced his bid for the 2016 presidential election. While his controversial announcement created waves worldwide, the focus in South Carolina was on healing the state. Haley herself attended all 9 funerals of those who were slain. It all took a toll. Weight loss, post-traumatic stress, the most challenging time of her life. But even as Trump's rhetoric, which included racial dog whistles, as well as undertones of hate and xenophobia, began registering with bigger and bigger crowds, including in early voting South Carolina, Haley's lieutenant governor took note of the growing dissatisfaction that Trump had tapped into and became the first statewide official in the nation to endorse Trump. A savvy move that would pay Henry McMaster dividends and make him Haley's successor in early 2017.
To paraphrase one of the poets of our time, Buffalo Springfield, there's something happening here. What it is precisely clear. We are going to make America great again with Donald Trump. Thank you, and God bless you.
But Haley couldn't stomach the Trump rhetoric and the fervor it stoked, and alluded to as much when she delivered the Republican response to President Barack Obama's 2016 State of the Union address.
During anxious times, it can be tempting to follow the siren call of the angriest voices. We must resist that temptation. No one who is willing to work hard, abide by our laws, and love our traditions should ever feel unwelcome in this country. At the same time, that does not mean we just flat out open our borders. We can't do that. We cannot continue to allow immigrants to come here illegally.
Haley and Senator Tim Scott, whom she appointed to fulfill Jim DeMint's remaining term in 2012, ended up backing Florida Senator Marco Rubio, a snub to former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, who had been close with Haley early in her career, but was flailing in polls and eventually came in 4th in South Carolina's primary. Even Rubio narrowly won second place over Senator Ted Cruz. They were both 10 points behind Trump.
South Carolina went through a terrible tragedy last year. And the KKK came to South Carolina from out of state to protest on our Statehouse grounds. We saw and looked at true hate in the eyes last year in Charleston. I will not stop until we fight a man that chooses not to disavow the KKK. That is not a part of our party. That's not who we want as president. We will not allow that in our country.
Right now, a historic moment. We can now project the winner of the presidential race. CNN projects Donald Trump wins the presidency.
Despite being a reluctant Trump supporter, his 2016 win created a silver lining that no one expected: Nikki Haley's third act. This time giving the state chief executive experience on the international stage as the ambassador to the United Nations. A thank you from Trump to clear the way for McMaster to finally become governor, with Haley moving up. Before she was confirmed by the U.S. Senate, she gave her seventh and final State of the State address, where she recalled some of the important and difficult moments of her tenure.
I will remember the willingness of the people in this room to step into someone else's shoes, find genuine understanding, remove a divisive symbol of an oppressive past, and move South Carolina forward.
Days later, and moments after securing enough votes in the Senate, Haley resigned and watched on as her lieutenant governor, Henry McMaster, became the 117th governor, and with it, she headed to New York. She brought years of South Carolina political grit with her to the international stage and threw an initial punch on her first day.
And the way that we'll show value is to show our strength, show our voice, have the backs of our allies, and make sure that our allies have our back as well. For those that don't have our back, we're taking names.
From facing off against North Korea, Russia, China, and others, Haley fell into a groove and began trying to reform an institution which America heavily funds. Moving the embassy to Jerusalem, fighting North Korea on missile testing, and getting an arms embargo passed against the South Sudan were wins. But blasting Syria for gassing its own people and chastising foes for not supporting a resolution condemning Bashar al-Assad's regime was a defining moment. Removing the United States from the Human Rights Council was also a big win for Haley, who saw the organization as ineffective, considering the countries and regimes represented in the group.
That this step is not a retreat from human rights commitments. On the contrary, we take this step because our commitment does not allow us to remain a part of a hypocritical and self-serving organization that makes a mockery of human rights.
While fighting in New York, she still had to deal with the turmoil of the unorthodox Trump administration. However, as a cabinet member and part of the National Security Council, she was always able to cut through to reach Trump if she needed to. Haley, who had outlasted others in the shaky first years of the Trump administration, including the Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, both who were ousted in the spring of 2018, was now feeling the squeeze of their replacements, Mike Pompeo and John Bolton, respectively, who sought to clamp down any influence or input by Haley, contributing factors that led to her decision to bow out at the end of the year, which she surprised Trump with in an October 2018 announcement.
I think you have to be selfless enough to know when you step aside and allow someone else to do the job. So thank you, Mr. President. It's been an honor of a lifetime. And I will say this, for all of you that are going to ask about 2020, no, I'm not running for 2020. I can promise you what I'll be doing is campaigning for this one. So I look forward to supporting the president in the next election.
Haley became a private citizen for the first time in 14 years in January 2019. And despite rumors that she was preparing to replace Vice President Mike Pence, she wrote 2 books, briefly joined the Boeing Board of Directors, gave high-dollar speeches, and lived a relatively unscheduled life with her family as she watched her party lose the White House in 2020, building on the losses of the 2018 midterms. She also worked to support a red wave that did not materialize in the 2022 midterms. The need to take the country in another direction is something she has spoken recently about.
But when you're looking at a run for president, you look at 2 things. You first look at, does the current situation push for new leadership? The second question is, am I that person that could be that new leader? That yes, we need to go in a new direction. And can I be that leader? Yes, I think I can be that leader. I was as governor.